August 28th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with South Korea's 2025 budget proposal. The Yoon administration has allocated around 510 billion US dollars for next year's budget, with much focus on vulnerable groups and the country's economic revival. And following weeks-long bipartisan disputes, a full Congress session at the Nat'l Assembly starts today to approve dozens of bills also designed to improve the livelihoods of South Korean people. Ukraine's incursion into Russia's Kursk region was a part of Kyiv's victory plan, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says. He also said the victory plan that he plans to present to U.S. President Joe Biden largely depends on Washington. The South Korean government has proposed a budget of around $510 billion, with promises to help vulnerable groups get back on their feet, while making sure the country's economy stays right on track to revitalization. Our finance correspondent Lee Soo-jin starts us off.
The government, while continuing its tightening stance, is focusing on investing in policies that aim to boost the livelihood of vulnerable groups. To do so, pan-governmental efforts will be directed towards expanding welfare support and vitalizing the economy.
내년에도 이러한 기조를 이어 여러 부처가 경계를 넘어 함께 사업을 기획하고 집행할 수 있도록 협업 예산을 확대했습니다. 우리 정부는 역대 어느 정부보다도 어려운 분들을 두텁게 지원하고 있습니다. 앞으로도 이러한 약자 복지 기조를 계속 이어갈 것입니다.
During a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, the Yoon administration proposed a budget for next year of 677 trillion Korean won, or around 510 billion US dollars at the current exchange rate. That's an increase of 3.2% from this year's budget. While it's larger than the increase of 2.8% of the 2024 budget, the government is continuing to tighten its belt as it remains in the process of strengthening fiscal soundness.
In the process of responding to the pandemic, the sustainability of our finances significantly weakened, and not just in our country, but in all countries. Despite this, the government will diligently invest in areas where investment is required.
As part of efforts to expand welfare, the government will increase the maximum annual basic living allowance for low-income families to around $17,000 from the current $16,000. That's a rise of $1,059 compared to last year. To vitalize the economy, the government is providing financial support for small business owners that include subsidies of a maximum $225 per year for delivery and shipping costs. The research and development budget will also be set at a record high of around $22 billion, with a focus on boosting investment in major industries such as semiconductors. And to address the country's low birth rate, the government will raise next year's budget for parental leave benefits by more than $1 billion compared to this year's. This will provide paid parental leave of up to around $1,800 per month for the first 3 months. With next year's budget, South Korea's so-called managed fiscal deficit, which excludes social security funds like the national pension, is expected to fall more than $10 billion compared to this year. The government plans to submit the bill to the National Assembly in early September to be finalized by December. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
So yet another year of belt tightening, but the South Korea's number one priority remains making people's livelihoods better, especially for those in the vulnerable groups. For more, let's discuss more with Professor Hwang Young-sik this morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
So, President Yoon vowed to uphold fiscal prudence while prioritizing the welfare of vulnerable groups as well as boosting the economic growth. Let's talk about that first.
Yes, this year's budget spending, next year, 2025, is mostly on the so-called social minority groups, disabled, single-parent families, small business owners, and the areas of R&D. So generally, it covers most of the weak links in our society. But the serious problem in our society mostly is on the small business. The recently, after the COVID-19, many small business owners are having hard time. Although this plan has covering the area of small business, and we need more support for that, since it's going to be the origin of economic recession, at the same time social problem.
Professor Huang, let's also talk about jobs. The proportion of jobs taken by people aged 60 and above reached an all-time high this year, all because of the aging society. Now, still, the government is supplying a record 1.1 million jobs for seniors next year. The question is there still a much-needed plan?
Yes, this time is a little bit differentiated from previous support. It's actually allowing to cover around 10% of the senior citizens. And this time, that the unique aspect of this is that they are supplying for education, like the vouchers, lifetime education vouchers. At the same time, they're raising the basic pension around 10,000 won. And again, this senior number of increase of senior citizens is actually, they are the asset to our society and our history of Korea economic restructuring. So I assume among these senior citizens, there are many specialized well-educated citizens. So we need to utilize, our society need to utilize them to be in the like mentoring services and the areas of specialized industry that we need to actually supply them to economy. They are still healthy enough to work.
Well, that's an interesting point, Professor Huang. But at the same time, the employment rate for members of the younger generations, especially those between 15 and 29 years old, has been on a downward trend here in the country. Is there anything that the government can do that's similar to what it is doing for senior citizens then?
That's right. So it's hard to achieve to catch the bird with the stone. So it's actually what we need to do is, rather than just supporting these youngsters, we need to actually tailor them to educate. So the budget is actually most geared towards education, like career exploration, job search, and how the university graduates are throughout their process of freshman to senior grade, the government, especially Department of Education, is helping them to have a career plan from the freshman stage to the graduation stage.
And another South Korea's top priority is addressing the country's notoriously low birth rate. Professor Huang, what measures do you think stand out in next year's budget regarding this matter?
Yes, this is actually mainly the birth rate problem is from the Korean society's the external environment. Mostly that I assume, this is my personal point of view, is that the education, that many parents are spending too much on private education, and that's actually the major issue. Many students want to go top schools, and that's why the public education does not work well. That's why many parents are selectively have kids. In other words, 1 or 2 kids, and that actually accumulated over the years, and now we have this problem. So actually, what government needs to do is that helps parents to support make the environment to raise the kids. So this time, the budget plan actually have more on comprehensive support for the including the child care leave, caregiving, supporting house expenses. Very broad plan.
Well, Professor Huang, before I let you go, isn't the government also making quite an investment in R&D and advanced industries? I mean, a record amount for next year, which is a sharp turnaround from this year's notable cuts in research and development.
Yes, this is the most interesting part since I'm in the college, university. And the last year we found that actually this year, huge R&D cuts. And looks like this time there was an increase in R&D overall compared to last year, but still is shorter than the earlier years. But what we can tell from this year's plan is that government is actually more focusing on supporting the game changer industry like AI, semiconductors, biotech, robotics, quantum technology. So government's position is that they want to selectively support on the major areas of industry where Korea has more advantages over other nations. And also we still need to develop in these areas. So I can tell from that, from last year, there's an increased budget, but still we need more increase.
Alrighty, Professor Huang, thank you so much for your time and your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And President Yoon will deliver a briefing to the nation and hold a press conference on Thursday to highlight his administration's major policy tasks. A presidential official said Tuesday that the briefing will focus on the government's goals and progress and reforming the public pension system, the labor environment, the medical sector, and education, as well as improve the nation's chronically low birth rate. In particular, Yoon is expected to lay out the direction of the government's pension reform plan, as the current national pension fund is projected to run out by the year 2055. The official said the president's speech will touch upon themes including people's livelihoods, public safety, reform, and communication. The National Assembly is holding a plenary session today where it has agreed to pass a set of so-called livelihood bills following weeks-long bipartisan disputes. Our correspondent Lee Si-hoo has the details.
For the first time since its launch in May, the 22nd National Assembly is ready to hammer out a set of so-called livelihood bills with bipartisan agreement. Among them is a revision to an existing act expanding support for the victims of real estate rental fraud. Both the ruling People Power Party and the main opposition Democratic Party agreed on the change, which will guarantee the victims of rental scams up to 20 years of residence in the property they've rented. Another new proposal restricts the rights of parents to inherit their deceased sons or daughters' money and assets when they did not sufficiently carry out their parental duties. The so-called Kuhara bill is named after the late K-pop star whose mother and brother disputed over who would inherit the singer's money after her death. And amid calls for practical support for working parents is a bill calling for the extension of paternity leave from the current 10 to 20 days and fertility treatment leave from the current 3 to 6 days. And for the socially vulnerable are bills to lower energy costs for their homes, as well as the redevelopment of old, worn-out housing. Despite the rare move of unity, however, possible tensions may arise as the DP tries to push for opposition-led bills that have been vetoed by President Yoon Suk-yeol. The party said it's possible they'll put up for a revote a bill on economic relief payment in the form of vouchers worth around 250,000 Korean won, or roughly around $180 to each South Korean citizen. The PPP, on the other hand, is calling it a move to, quote, sprinkle cash and remains opposed to it. If the main opposition goes through with the vote, a strong protest is expected from the ruling party. Meanwhile, the National Assembly Health and Welfare Committee is planning to hold multiple subcommittee meetings right up to the plenary session on Wednesday afternoon to discuss the ruling party push changes to the Nursing Act to provide the legal basis for medical practice by specialized physician assistants. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Washington says it is taking the threat of North Korea's suicide drones seriously, and that the U.S. will continue its commitment to its allies to ensure regional security. That's according to Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder on Tuesday, adding that it will keep an eye on the development of such weapons. When asked about how to respond to Pyongyang's threats, Ryder said Washington will work with its allies and partners to promote security and be prepared for any threats coming from the north. The comments come after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un oversaw a performance test of drones on Saturday and called for the development and production of more suicide drones. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says his country's incursion into Russia's Kursk region was a part of what he calls a victory plan. He's also planning to present the idea to U.S. President Joe Biden. Our An Sung-jin reports.
Ukraine wants to end the war with Russia, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy seeks to do so by presenting to the U.S. a victory plan which will force Russia to end the war.
It will be fair to present this plan to the U.S. President. The success of this plan depends on him, whether we will get what is in this plan or not, whether we will have freedom to use the things prescribed by the plan or not.
While speaking at a forum on Tuesday, Zelenskyy added that he will present this plan in September during a meeting with Biden and will also convey it to Biden's two potential successors, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Zelenskyy also noted how the recent operation in the Kursk region in Russia is a part of this plan. Ukraine's Kursk Oblast operation intended to divert Russian military forces from other areas, especially offensives in eastern Ukraine, such as Pokrovsk, a key hub with crucial railway station. According to the commander-in-chief Alexander Syrsky, Russia has deployed 30,000 troops to the Kursk region, and the number is growing. During the same forum, Zelenskyy also announced that Ukraine carried out its first test of a domestically made ballistic missile, though further details could not be provided.
There was successful test of the first ballistic Ukrainian missile, and I congratulate defense industry with this fact.
Though ballistic missiles have been used against Russia, they had been provided by the U.S. rather than built domestically. Meanwhile, Russia's air attacks on Ukraine have been continuing since early this week, causing casualties and blackouts across the country. Russian drone and missile attacks targeted multiple regions in Ukraine on Tuesday, killing at least 6 people. And as Kyiv's incursion into the Kursk region continues, IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi stated on Tuesday that Russia's Kursk nuclear power plant was at serious risk of a nuclear accident due to its fragility. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump says he's agreed to hold a televised debate against Vice President Kamala Harris on September 10th. Now, in the same style as the one he had with President Joe Biden back in June. Lee Seung-jae has more.
The last time former U.S. President Donald Trump took part in a televised debate was in June against U.S. President Joe Biden. With Biden struggling in that debate, Trump's chances of winning the November election rose. Months later, Trump has agreed to another televised debate. However, this time, he is looking at a completely different opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris. Taking to his social media platform Truth Social on Tuesday, Trump said he has agreed to take part in the televised debate hosted by ABC News against Harris on September 10th, but under the condition that the rules are the same as those enforced in CNN's June debate. Reiterating the previous rules, Trump said the debate will be held with both candidates standing up without pre-written notes. He called for a fair and equitable debate with no questions being given in advance to either side. However, the Trump and Harris camps continued to argue over whether to allow the muting of microphones during the September debate. Trump's campaign insists that each candidate should have their microphones muted when it's not their turn to speak, as was the case in June. However, the Harris campaign believes that the microphones should be open throughout the debate to allow viewers to hear if Trump interrupts or talks over the vice president. The debate is scheduled to be held in Philadelphia and will be moderated by David Muir and Lindsay Davis from ABC News. The September 10th debate was initially set to take place between Trump and Biden before the incumbent dropped out of the race. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Walter Lee, and this is The World Now. We start off in Mexico, where on Tuesday local time, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador called for a pause in diplomatic relations with the embassies of the US and Canada, not the countries, after their ambassadors criticized Obrador's proposed judicial reform. The reform, which aims to elect judges and Supreme Court justices by popular vote, recently passed a key committee in Mexico's lower house. The US Embassy, in a diplomatic note, expressed significant concerns about the impact of electing judges. Canada's Ambassador Graham Clark also raised concerns about how this reform could affect investment in Mexico. Proponents argue the reform will strengthen democracy, while critics warn it could consolidate executive power and expose the judiciary to the criminal influence. The Israeli military announced Tuesday that its special forces had recovered an Israeli hostage from a tunnel in southern Gaza. An IDF spokesperson provided few details other than that the operation had freed 52-year-old Qaid Farhan al-Qaidi, a member of the Bedouin community in southern Israel, after more than 10 months of being held captive. He was taken to hospital where his condition is reported to be stable. Al-Qaidi, who worked as a security guard at the kibbutz near the Gaza border, was among the more than 250 people abducted when armed members of the militant group Hamas launched an attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, which also left 1,200 dead. He is the 8th hostage to be rescued since then, but 108 Israeli and foreign hostages remain in Gaza, with about a third of those confirmed dead. A Greek-flagged oil tanker is still on fire in the Red Sea after being attacked last Friday by Yemen's Houthi militants. The tanker, named Yoon, carrying 1 million barrels of crude oil, is now leaking oil. Efforts proposed by the US to salvage the ship have been hindered, with the Houthis threatening to attack rescue tugs. This is the third vessel operated by Delta tankers targeted this month, as the Houthis continue their attacks on ships near Yemen, citing solidarity with Palestinians in the Israel-Hamas conflict. German cyclist Eric Fedko performs an amazing stunt on a bike elevated above the trees at Greenhill Bike Park in the Sauerland Mountains in Germany. The cyclist, who is well known in the global slope-style mountain biking community, launched himself from a 3.2 high tree trunk on the top of a platform. Fedko said that the mental part of the stunt came down to the conditions, such as the shaky and windy weather, and also the height. But luckily for Fedko, the conditions were perfect, making for a beautiful backdrop for his latest achievement.
Good morning. Finally, the capital area woke up to a long-awaited autumn-like morning, even breezier in Gangneung at about 20 degrees Celsius this morning. However, Jeju Island had another hot night, waking up to the longest number of tropical nights so far at 44. But there will be a big rise in highs this afternoon. Now, Typhoon Shanshan, which is heading towards southwestern Japan, is causing high seas and typhoon alerts for parts of the South and East Seas. Meanwhile, easterly winds will bring downpours to the east coast and Jeju Island, with a heavy rain warning being issued for the island. And Jeju could see up to 100 millimeters of downpours. The east coast could see 10 to 80 millimeters through Friday. Afternoon highs will be 1 to 5 degrees higher this afternoon, topping out at 33 degrees here in the capital, and over in Daejeon. Chuncheon, Daegu will see a high of 32 degrees Celsius. It's going to stay mostly sunny in central inland areas. It should be hotter than average for the next 5 days under dry and mostly sunny skies in the capital area. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time.